We have a very lively morning waiting for us. We'll start with the keynote speech for today, which will be held by Jesus Alquezar Sabadier. I hope I have pronounced your surname correctly. And then we'll go to the ordinary sessions and after the coffee break. So Jesus is a political scientist. He comes from the University of the Basque Country in Spain. He is currently a socio-economic analyst at the General Directorate for the Environment of the European Commission, and his talk today will try to outline the relation between the European Green Deal and the circular economy in order to understand opportunities and challenges open for research and for policy making in this framework. Jesus, please, the floor is yours. We'll listen to your presentation with a great interest. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate to this conference, unfortunately online. It had to be done last year already in Ferrara, but unfortunately we are here. But I was following yesterday both the keynote speech and the presentations, and I think that indeed my presentation that aims at presenting really the objectives and some key elements of the European Green Deal is rather complementary to what was said yesterday. I think it's important to present the framework of the Green Deal to understand several policies, including the orientations of the new circular economy action plan. I'm not going to do the traditional presentation that we always do about the Green Deal, because I want to also make some reflections that are not necessarily the position of the Commission. It's more a personal reflection and a reflection to have a discussion later about the challenges of both the Green Deal and the circular economy. And I would like also to do a short reflection about what can be the impact of the Green Deal on research and innovation. So research and innovation funded by the EU, Horizon Europe, but also more in general. I'm going to share then my presentation. Do you see the presentation, the PowerPoint?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I don't know, maybe I did something wrongly. 1 second. I suppose I have to present the entire screen. Share. And now
it's starting. Okay,
it's coming, I think.
It disappeared after a few seconds. Okay.
Do you see it now?
We can see Ursula von der Leyen.
Yes, this. Yes, I hate this photo. I don't know why in the standard presentations. Oops, what is happening now? They put this photo. So really, if she looks at herself, I don't think she will be very happy. But okay, so. I'm going to, I like to start these presentations about the European Green Deal talking about this report that you probably know of the European Environment Agency that is published periodically every 5 or 6 years about the state and about the state of environment, of European environment. So really, for us, people working on the environmental policy at EU level, this is a sort of Bible. We have all the information on all the state and situation of the environment in Europe. As I say, this is a report that is published periodically. The assessment of the previous version and this one is similar, But there is a big difference that is very well explained in this sentence from Hans Brünig, the executive director of the EEA. So really, the big difference is that now action is extremely urgent. So we have 10 years really to scale up measures to protect nature, diminish the impacts of climate change, etc. In fact, we always talk about climate change as a big problem, and we all agree. But the report explains that we are facing 4 environmental crises. The first one is, of course, the climate one, but we are facing also biodiversity loss, resource depletion, and pollution. And these 4 crises are interrelated. This is something that very often in the narrative, and I will come back to this later, is forgotten. We still have a tendency to follow a fragmented logic. So I work or I deal with climate, I forget about the interrelations with the other crises. So on the climate crisis, I think it's not necessary to say anything. We saw last week that it was snowing in Texas, in Athens, while in my home region, I'm from the Basque Country, there was a massive forest fire, something unusual in February because it's one of the most rainy areas in Spain. So these examples, we have many, show the impact of the climate crisis. But let me illustrate with some data the other crisis. So on biodiversity, we know that since 1970, we have lost 60% of mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, and amphibians. Also in 3 decades in Germany, but these data generally, we consider that they can be extrapolated to Europe. In the last 3 decades, the flying insect population has decreased by 76%. And of course, this has an impact also on our food security because many of these insects are pollinators. Already in 2014, different studies estimated a deficit of 1.4 million bee colonies, so around 7 billion individuals, to pollinate the European agriculture. So when we talk about biodiversity loss, it's not just an aesthetic problem. It's also an issue for our life, for our food. And as you know, there are different studies that are showing that there is an interrelation between biodiversity loss and pandemics like the current COVID-19. On resources depletion, so we know that the use of natural resources has more than multiplied by 4 since 1970. It continues to grow. Only 9% of the plastic that is generated in the planet is recycled. And in Europe, even if we are moving towards the circular economy, only 12% of the materials that we are using are recycled. Again, these trends are unlikely to change because we know that 140 million people join the middle class every year in the planet, with their, of course, increased consumption and interest to consume more.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, Jesus, but
Yes.
are you showing further slides, perhaps?
No, it's the same because for the time being. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, don't worry. Then it is expected that 70% of the population will live in urban areas by 2050. And half of this urban infrastructure is not built yet. So imagine the quantity of cement and steel, of course, if we don't change the way of building, that this will represent, and their associated emissions of GHG, so greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants. Finally, on pollutions, only one data that for me is very impressive. Every year, air pollution leads to more than 400,000 premature deaths in European member states. So we are living a pandemic, but in reality, we have a mini pandemic every year due to pollution. So as I say, these environmental crises are interrelated. Let me give you an example. So climate change, of course, affects biodiversity. So because, of course, it leads to water stress, to ocean acidification, to more pollution, to biodiversity loss in general. It also affects health and well-being because of air quality problems, infections, diseases, extreme events. What we sometimes forget is that also biodiversity is a solution for climate change. Why? First of all, because in terms of mitigation, 50% of the anthropogenic emissions are captured by ecosystems, terrestrial and marine ecosystems, while deforestation represents about 12 to 15% GHG emissions. What is the problem? That in Europe, the carbon sinks of our ecosystems is going down. And this goes in parallel to, of course, biodiversity loss that I mentioned before. Also, in terms of adaptation, ecosystem services provides services like water and air purification, protections against desertification and floods, urban heat reduction. But the issue is that these ecosystems are not in a good state and condition. This is an example of these interlinks. We know also, according to the United Nations International Resource Panel, that 90% of the loss of biodiversity and water stress in the planet are provoked by the extraction and transformation and of natural resources. So you see that there is also a link between excessive resource extraction, resource depletion, and biodiversity and climate. So probably you are going to ask me or to ask yourself, my God, we are in a very bad situation. What is the Commission doing? In fact, the Commission or the European Union has been developed since the 70s a very, very comprehensive environmental legislation that covers all possible fields. So water, waste, air pollution, climate, of course, chemicals, etc. And according to the own assessment of the European Environment Agency, this has been rather successful. So the situation, for example, of fresh water in rivers, lakes, etc., is nowadays much better than 20 years ago. I come from an industrial region in Spain, and indeed, I remember that the rivers, when I was younger, were completely yellow and without any vegetation or life. And it's the same with air quality. We are confronted with a big problem of air quality, but it was even worse some decades ago. However, the assessment of the EEA is that the pressures on environment are also increasing. And this leads that this environmental policy, this environmental legislation is not enough, is not sufficient. And as I said before, the big difference between the previous State of Environmental Environment report and this one is that now more urgent action is needed. Okay, you know about this global challenge, the growth of population. I mentioned it already before. These issues are something that are not only for ecologists or people involved on climate and environmental policy. So the own World Economic Forum, whose story is not characterized for being very green, shows that amongst the main risk for the long term, we have 5 of them are linked with environment. So even industry and industrial dirigents in the planet are aware about this issue. So the European Green Deal aims at giving a response to this big challenge. What are the main characteristics of the European Green Deal? First of all, it wants to give a coherent and systemic response. So coherent because now the policies have to answer or to respond in a coherent manner to the different environmental problems, going even beyond the traditional climate and environmental policies. So also taxation, and yesterday the keynote speech was about taxation, has to contribute to the Green Deal objectives. Also trade, the trade policy that also historically has not been the most green. So this is the idea of coherent and systemic approach. It must integrate the different policies, as I said, and it includes what is called the do not harm principle. What does it mean? That every policy has to take into account the negative impacts it can have on other policies. This is something really new, surprisingly, because, for example, if you look at the priorities of the Juncker Commission, environment was not amongst the priority, except climate change linked with energy. It was, I think, the third priority. But the Commission has created, so this was rather successful. We have reached the objectives for 2020. So now the renewable energy represents more than 20% of our energy consumption, etc. But it creates also other problems, for example, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of air pollution. And this is something that we have to avoid now with this green oath to do not harm. What is also very interesting in the European Green Deal is in the left part of this slide, is that von der Leyen, in her speech to the European Parliament, presented the Green Deal like a new raison d'être, like a new principle of the European Union. It's very interesting to read the speech, because she says, okay, for the generation of my parents, of her parents, Europe was, the objective of Europe was peace in Europe. Then it was well-being and economic growth, etc. But now, really, the problem for the younger generations is really living in a more natural and healthy continent. So this is really a very important element of the European Green Deal. There is something that is more arguable. We can discuss about it later. So the Green Deal is presented as a new growth and jobs strategy. I say that this is more arguable because different people, I'm amongst those who think personally that, and there is a recent report of the EEA also reflecting on this issue, consider that how can we have infinite growth if our resources in the planet are limited. So there is something that even philosophically doesn't work there. But this is something we can discuss later. For the Commission, it is very clear the Green Deal is a growth strategy. This figure shows the different actions that have been announced, many of them already presented, adopted, and you see how we have these interlinkages between the policies. So if we go here, the Commission has already presented a proposal for a climate law to legally establish that the European Union becomes climate neutral by 2050. To reach this goal, the Commission has also presented a new climate target by 2030. Now it is 40% emissions reduction, so GHG emissions reduction. And to reach the carbon neutrality, the climate neutrality objective by 2050, we have to increase our efforts now. And then the proposal is to increase this target to at least 55% of GHG emissions reductions, always compared with 1990, the year of the Kyoto Protocol. To reach these more ambitious climate objectives, the Commission is now revising the relevant legislation. So the emission trading system, ETS, the effort sharing regulation, ESR, the land use change and forestry, LULUCF, the Renewable Energy Directive, and the Energy Efficiency Directive. We had also yesterday a discussion about this possible carbon border adjustment mechanism on which also the Commission is working, and the new energy taxation directive on which the Commission is working. But all this is not yet adopted, so the different impact assessments are ongoing. Linked with, in parallel and linked with this, the Commission has presented already a biodiversity strategy, a new farm-to-fork strategy to make the food system more sustainable, a new circular economy action plan, and on other initiatives like a hydrogen strategy, a methane strategy, an offshore strategy. A renovation wave is going to be published next year. No, this was already published. Sorry, I'm mixing the next one, which is the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which is planned for 2021, a new forest strategy also for 2021. So you see that there is really, you have here the list, a huge number of strategies and action plans already adopted. Of course, the question is, okay, the Commission can present fantastic strategies, but now it's time to implement. And this is generally more tricky. To implement these objectives, the Commission presented the European Green Deal Investment Plan, which the aim of mobilizing at least 1 trillion euros of investments. Of course, this is not money coming in form of grants from the EU. So the idea is to create with the EU investments, through the EU funding, through InvestEU, and from the European Investment Bank loans, a leverage for investments. So the logic is the one similar to the former Juncker action plan, recovery plan. So this European Green Deal investment plan had also a just transition mechanism, because this is something that I forgot to mention. The Green Deal has also a strong social component. The idea, so we know that we need a radical transition in our economy. We need to change our consumption and production patterns, and this will create losers and winners. We hope that more winners than losers, but it's clear that regions like those which economy depends on coal or fossil fuels are going to suffer. And this is why also the Commission presented this just transition mechanism to mobilize at least 100 billion for these regions through financial support based on transition plans and with technical assistance. What happens then? This was before the COVID-19. As you can imagine, with the crisis, the COVID crisis, there were strong pressures to the European institutions, not only the Commission, from member states or from some member states, and from stakeholders, enterprises, lobbies, etc., to come back to the previous model. So the idea was, okay, yes, the Green Deal is very nice, but now we have a crisis, so let's come back to the previous model and recover. On this, the Commission was very, very clear. The logic was, the Green Deal is our growth economy, our growth strategy, so it must be our recovery roadmap. You followed in the newspaper, in the media, the long discussions between the European member states on the recovery and resilience facility that was proposed by the Commission, initially with 750 billion euros. Finally, it's almost 700 billion, more or less half as a grant and half as loans. How this recovery and resilience plan is going to be implemented? It's going to be based on national plans. The Commission is already receiving these national plans and is giving recommendations to the member states. The plans have to include investments and reforms, and all have to be coherent with the Green Deal objectives and also the digitalization objectives, which is another priority of the Commission. And what is very important here when we talk about this RRF, Recovery and Resilience Facility, is that it's strongly based on the do not harm principle. In the scrutiny that the Commission is doing, especially of the projects, the do not harm principle is strictly followed. So we are checking, for example, if certain projects of certain countries can lead to more pollution or to more resource extraction. And this is likely to be not supported. So the member states have to be very careful with this do not harm principle. So this was an overview of the situation of the Green Deal, and I'm going to now focus a little bit more on the circular economy, because this is the purpose of this workshop. So you have here some data about the challenge. I mentioned some of these statistics already. You are all aware about these trends. We are extracting more and more materials. This has impacts on pollution, on biodiversity, on climate. So here we see that, for example, the EU industry accounts for 20% of the European Union's emissions. And the response that was already given by the Commission in 2015 with the first Circular Economy Action Plan, we have to take into account that 2015 was a very important year. It was the year of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and the Circular Economy Action Plan. Probably not by case that everything happened in the same year. And you perfectly know what is the circular economy concept. So I always like to present this slide, this animation. So the idea is to pass from a linear model and to a more circular model based on that covers the full life cycle of the products, from design, so design for longer lifetime, design for repair, for recycling, for reusing. And the idea is to keep the added value of products, materials, and resources as much time as possible within the system. Of course, when the first Circular Economy Action Plan was adopted, the idea was not only environmental. So it was not only to reduce the resources extraction and to reduce the harm of environment. There was a very strong economic priority. Europe doesn't have natural resources to exploit, and we rely on imported materials. So the idea was also to ensure the supply of raw materials for the European industry, and then boost the competitiveness of the European economy. This is something that was interesting yesterday also in the presentations, because I think the two components, sometimes I come from DG Environment, we focus on the environmental aspect, but there is also a strong economic aspect. So the first Circular Economy Action Plan has been rather successful. These are data of 2016. These data have been updated, but I don't have these nice pictures. So you see that the Circular Economy Action Plan has created employment. We are talking now about more than 4 million workers. This is increasing. Also, the repair, reuse, and recycling sector is increasing its added value and investments. And this is something that we expect that is going to increase, because there is more and more demand for secondary raw materials. But as I said before, the recycled materials represent only 12% of the raw materials demand. So despite of this success, or relative success, is not enough. So under the Green Deal, there is already a new Circular Economy Action Plan adopted, which focuses mainly on 4 sectors: textiles. So you know that textiles is one of the most polluting sectors, and is linked both to the production patterns and the consumption patterns. When we are buying clothes several times every year because they are very cheap, at the end, we have an impact on environment. Is construction. So the idea is really in construction to include this life cycle logic, and this is something hard to do, and I can come back to some examples later. Electronics and plastics. There was already a plastic strategy presented under the first Circular Economy Action Plan. One very important element of this strategy is that it aims at empowering consumers, giving them clearer and more accurate information on the product sustainability, for example, through giving information on the footprint of these products. The aim is also to avoid greenwashing. And yesterday, again, there were some presentations on which is the propensity of consumers to pay more for something better. And I think this information, these papers that were presented are very relevant for this to implement this Circular Economy Action Plan. Then the idea is, of course, to increase the criteria for sustainability and circularity of products. And there are different regulations on waste and end of life of vehicles, batteries. This has been already adopted, transport of waste, etc., that are foreseen. One of the objectives is that all packaging in the EU will be reusable or recyclable by 2030. And this requires, of course, changing business models. Yes, I already mentioned this slide. One additional element that I think is important to raise, because now I'm focusing on the Green Deal, but another priority of the current Commission is this digital transformation. And the idea is, of course, to use better digital instruments for monitoring and optimizing the use of natural resources and energy in the circular economy. I'm going to move now to the challenges of the Green Deal. One is what I called, most of the participants are Italian, so they know this sentence, cambiare tutto per non cambiare nulla, or the greenwashing temptation. As you can imagine, many member states and stakeholders are, of course, logically reluctant to the transformative changes that the European Union, the European Green Deal implies. And they tend to present their current practices. It can be forestry practices, it can be different practices on the use of resources as something already sustainable. And this pushes the ambition to a lower ambition. One of the traditional strategies to support this non-changing anything is to focus on one environmental issue and not on this systemic approach. For example, typically one is, okay, climate. I have a lot of trees and I use them for bioenergy. So this is very good for climate. And they are ignoring, of course, the impact that this has on biodiversity or on pollution when you are burning this wood. They are even ignoring that this has impacts on the carbon sinks that are measured in through another piece of legislation, the LULUCF that I mentioned before. This is not only a problem of member states and stakeholders or industry, it's also a problem within the Commission, because as you can imagine, big administrations are like big elephants. They have a very big inertia. It's very difficult to stop an elephant. And it's not easy to change the habits, the personal contacts, and the mindsets of the administrative services of the Commission. So this logic of focusing only on one single problem without looking around is happening very often within the Commission. And this can be really an issue in the current revision of relevant legislation. We are seeing it, for example, for the current revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive, where some DGs are proposing to move towards more life cycle logics, but there is a certain reluctance to do so. Also for practical reasons. I don't want to blame my colleagues. The second problem is linked with the first one. So the complexity of the problems and solutions is huge. And this is something that we are seeing even in the scientific literature. If you look at the IPCC assessment reports, historically, they have focused only on climate. The circular economy, for example, was never mentioned in the summary for policymakers. And the link between climate and biodiversity in these reports used to be in one direction. So climate affects biodiversity, but not the opposite, except when there were discussions about carbon sinks. This tendency, even in the scientific world, is changing, and the IPCC, for example, in the special reports on the oceans and the cryosphere or on land, they are already integrating this bidirectional relationship between biodiversity and climate. But implementing these complex solutions is more complicated in policy making, especially at European level. Another problem is the communication. So again, the European Union is not really characterized by its good communication. And to do the transformative change that the European Green Deal aims to, we need citizens' engagement. So the Commission is completely aware about this. And indeed, one of the actions of the strategy within the Green Deal is the Climate Pact, to launch a public debate and to allow exchanges and upgrade of solutions between citizens and stakeholders, cities, etc. But who is aware about this Climate Pact? How many people is really aware about the Green Deal and its objectives and about the recovery and resilience national plans? This is really an issue that I think has to be addressed. Then another problem, this is more technical, but I think is relevant to mention it in this workshop, is the perhaps excessive use of models in policy making. So, especially at European level, the impact assessments that are done for policies rely strongly on models which assumptions are not really presented transparency. These models focus particularly on climate and energy because, of course, as I mentioned before, the climate science has developed very fast in the last years. But at the end, what we observe is that they don't integrate, or they don't always integrate other Green Deal issues or environmental issues like biodiversity or the circular economy. For example, even if the role of the circular economy for decarbonization is really recognized already in scientific literature and in policy at European level, but also in member states, its impact is not modelized in the current documents and strategies and impact assessment of the Commission, because there are different reasons for this. Some are methodological, but there is again this inertia of the administration. And this is, of course, tricky because it can lead to misleading conclusions in the impact assessments in the policies. I could give you an example. In the 2030 climate targets impact assessment, there is an assessment of the impacts on biodiversity. And the assumption or the logic is that, okay, we can extend the use of bioenergy using energy crops. Yes, but energy crops are not necessarily good for biodiversity. So this is the sort of examples that we face. Then another issue is, now we have the RRF, we have a lot of money, we can invest. Yes, but what is going to happen after? So the money is likely to be expended in 2-3 years, but then what is going how are we going to finance the transition? The investment, the European Green Deal investment plan, is going to be enough to have this leverage? This is a big question mark, especially when our member states are the public debt of our member states is increasing radically. And last point, this is more focused on the circular economy. So the circular economy action plan has a monitoring framework, mainly based on macro indicators. So it provides very valuable information on consumption and production, like self-sufficiency of raw materials, green public procurement, food waste, etc. It provides information on waste management, recycling rates, on secondary raw materials, demand and trade, and on competitiveness and innovation. But this framework, which is based on indicators that existed before, doesn't provide micro information that is very important to define our policies. Yesterday, also in the presentations, we saw how this micro data can be used. So we need, for example, to know if a certain policy is going to lead to behavioral change or not. To develop these policies, and this is something that is missing in the monitoring framework. There are data that are collected. For example, the Community Innovation Survey has a module, and a specific module on eco-innovation published periodically every 6 years, I think, which is very valuable, but it doesn't cover all the member states. So at the end, we lack this sort of micro data that are very, very important to change to know which policies are really efficient to create a virtuous circle between policy, informing consumers, and changing the consumption and production patterns. My last slide is about the possible impacts of the Green Deal on research and innovation. The first one is, of course, that the Green Deal is really at the basis of the future work program of the Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe, as you know, is the framework program for research and innovation at European Union. In reality, this is not really new, because already Horizon 2020, so the current program, is very oriented towards sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is going to be reinforced under Horizon Europe. What is more interesting is this concept of the do not harm. So the topics that are prepared for the work program and the projects are expected to respond to the do not harm. So the Commission services are already doing a scrutiny of the draft work program to check if certain topics can have an impact on other areas, on other environmental problems. And what we expect is that projects will also be influenced by this do not harm. This will increase, of course, the complexity and will require more multidisciplinarity of the project teams. Of course, this is nothing new, so we are talking about multidisciplinarity of research for many years, but in my view, this is going to be reinforced, because not everyone can be expert on everything, and if we have to make these connections between different issues and following a life cycle thinking, we are likely to need the help of other people. Assess in research and innovation the value chain and the life cycle of the approaches that are proposed. So if we, for example, propose a solution to produce more wind energy offshore, we need to think on how are we going to source the materials, how are we going to build the installation, how are we going, what is going to be the impact on biodiversity, on water, on other users, fishermen, neighbors, sailors, etc., how are we going to dismantle this installation? How are we going to recycle materials that we used? You see, this implies a complexity and this concept of value chain and life cycle approach that is expected to be reinforced in research and innovation. And of course, this requires a more multi-dimensional analysis in research. Here I mentioned pure research, so scientific papers. We cannot stay with only a narrow vision. This technology reduces emissions. Yes, it reduces emissions, but what is the impact on biodiversity or resource extraction? And when you analyze the literature, very often, many papers are very focused on one single dimension without taking into account this multidimensional analysis. I think this was of course, this implies also a different mindset. I mentioned this before, and probably a different education and training. Even if I know that in universities, this is something that you are better placed to confirm. I see that there are more and more subjects for example, engineers or scientists related to these global challenges. So I think that compared with my university studies already in the last century, now the curricula are much more open. So in this presentation, just a quick wrap-up, I wanted to briefly explain the main political orientations of the current European Commission, focusing on the Green Deal. And for the first time ever, environment and climate are the top priority of the European Union. This is not really surprising because the public opinion, the European public opinion, is very concerned about the environmental and climate crisis. And the Eurobarometers demonstrate this. Yes, I'm stopping my sharing. So we 90% of the Europeans consider climate change and environmental problems as serious problems that affect them personally in their day-to-day. So probably one of the reasons for the Commission to focus now on environment was the mobilization of young people before the pandemics for climate action. I'm convinced that this really was a key element. And probably a second element was the rise of the extreme right in Europe that generally is also climate skeptic. So our political masters had to align with something positive, with a positive image of or orientation of the European Union to really relaunch the European Union integration process. These are, of course, my personal hypothesis. I never had the occasion to discuss with von der Leyen about this. Then another message of my presentation was that the Commission has been extremely active since the adoption of the Green Deal with many strategies and action plans, but now it's time to implement. And I try to reflect on some of the challenges, but also opportunities. So the RRF is a massive opportunity to carry out this transformation that we need. As I said before, I think my presentation today is rather complementary to what was presented yesterday, and I'm particularly curious to follow the presentations today and tomorrow to make more links with the European Green Deal principles and logics and to see how they are implemented in practice. So I'm open to your questions, and I will stay here also during the break for a more a more relaxed chat. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jesus, for this very interesting and lively and provoking presentation. I suggest if Jacopo agrees that we can stay here during the coffee break time. Of course, everyone is free to take a coffee in the meanwhile, but I think that the best use we can do of this time is to remain here and raise questions to Jesus. So I would like to propose that everyone having questions could raise the virtual hand. So I can see here the list of participants. So please keep your microphone switched off until I give you the floor, so we don't create a mess. I don't see, in fact, any hands being raised. So I think that my role as a chairperson is always about breaking the ice, okay, and make it. I found a lot of very interesting and provoking items in your presentation. I would like to make one comment, which is half a question and half a further provocation to you, if you want. When you listed the challenges in the end, I think that there is one further challenge that must be outlined, which is what I call the pollution heaven temptation. That is trying to keep your backyard tidy while delegating the dirty jobs to someone else. This has been very clear, for example, in the field of waste recycling and plastic waste, especially. We can raise the challenge of our circular economy targets, for example, in terms of plastics recycling. But if this means that all the plastic that is so-called recyclable, but in fact can be recycled only into something that nobody wants, this means simply to export flows of plastic waste to somewhere else. And when China decided to stop importing this kind of stuff, the problem appeared in all its dramatic evidence throughout Europe, and especially in countries like Italy, where the plastic recycling industry has been developing so fast. So I would like to urge adding this further challenge to the list, and I would like to know more about what the European Commission is planning to do with this respect. We know that a very important item contained in the Green Deal is precisely that of introducing systems of tariffs and environmental taxation in order to avoid creating a competitiveness gap between products that are coherent with the Green Deal and the circular economy strategy, and products that are not. But I think that the tariffs are not enough. So I would like to have your comment on this. In the meanwhile, let me see if there are hands. No, everybody is starving for coffee, I think. So please.
Yes, indeed. No, I fully agree with you. This is a problem that happens at micro and macro level. Yesterday, there were very good presentations demonstrating with micro data that this problem of not in my courtyard. So yes, I agree with producing biogas based on waste, based on residues, but not next to my house. So this is happening like this. And then also at more macro level, there is a certain problem with the objectives of the Commission. If we take, for example, the concept of climate neutrality. So climate neutrality is very clearly stated in the climate law, refers to domestic climate neutrality. So Europe is going to be climate neutral by 2050, but we are not counting there the emissions that we are importing. And so when we are consuming products imported from China, from India, from wherever, which the relative emissions, this is not counted. There are good reasons for this. It's also because this comes from the Paris Agreement. It's an international agreement, so we have to avoid double counting. But nothing would impede the Commission to say, okay, I'm going to count on the one hand the domestic emissions, and on the other hand my emissions from consumption. And this is something that we are not always taking into account. And this is very worrying. For example, there is a study focused on France, recently published, that shows that the impact of our consumption is 70% higher than what we are measuring, considering only our own domestic emissions. Concerning pollution, for example, on plastics, I didn't enter into the details. I was already too long, I'm sorry. But the RRF has to be financed. One of the own resources that the Commission proposed, and this is likely to go ahead, is indeed creating a tax on single-use plastics. Of course, the objective is double sides. So one is collect money to support, to reimburse the loans of the RRF. And the second one is to reduce the use of single-use plastics. The single-use plastics is also an interesting example, because the idea, so the strategy that was already presented, or the proposal of the Commission was already presented before the Green Deal, was also to ban those that have a substitution. So, for example, I remember this, how do you say when you, in English, when you drink something with a, yeah, okay. So the single-use plastics that have a technological technology,
I'm not sure.
yes, they are going to be banned, and the others would receive a tax. Yes, a straw. These sort of things. At the end, it doesn't look a lot, but they represent 80% of the plastics that we find in our oceans, so in our beach. So you see, the Commission is following always an approach of stick, in this case banning, or carrot, providing incentives to use less. So this is the traditional approach. But yes, I fully agree with you with the problem that you raised, and I think that it would be very important also to be transparent on the impact of our consumption, not only on climate. I mentioned the example of climate, but also other environmental impacts, and this is something we are not really covering.
Okay, I see two questions that have been that are going to be raised. One from Andrea Molocchi and another from Ilaria Di Battista. Women first. Andrea, you don't mind? So Ilaria, please.
No, I refer to Andrea because he was there from a long time, so I would amend this time.
No problem, Ilaria, go on, please.
Okay. Even though I don't like those kind of gentleman facts. Anyway, I was first of all, thank you very much for your presentation, clear and very interesting and very engaging. First of all, I am interested on what you said about education, because you only mentioned education. So I would like to ask you, first of all, what are the practices or the measures, the strategies about education of Europe? And I would like to know if you only are referring to the children and so schools education, but or also adults education. This is my question.
Yes. Okay. This is a difficult question for me because I used to work on education and training years ago, but now it's not really my main file.
It's not a problem. I don't want.
The problem with education, when we talk, No, but it's a very interesting, and I think it's something that we should reflect more on it. So it's a very good question. And so the problem is that education and training is not a competence of the European Union. So the European Union can only provide support to member states. Yes, facilitate changes, programs like Erasmus, etc. So this is the only role. So if you look at the different communications strategies of the Commission, yes, education and training is generally mentioned, but without going in depth on this. What I can see, because I have kids who are now 14 and 17, is that at least in the education model system they follow, they are much more aware about these problems and these interlinkages that I mentioned as a problem than I was when I was a kid. Even if I think that I was someone educated in ecology, always doing alpinism and these sort of things, but I think that they are better trained and better educated on this. This is something that I cannot extrapolate to all the educational systems. A second impact is more technical. So we are moving towards the circular economy, towards technologies like renewable energy, etc., that will require different skills. When we are talking, for example, I mentioned it, but without entering into detail, about the renovation wave, the Commission wants really to support the renovation of buildings, making them more energy and resource efficient. This requires many changes technically. So from people who made university studies, architects, etc., but also for the workers. So it's not the same installing solar panels in a roof than doing traditional work. So there is also a change in the education and training system that is required. And another issue that was more my focus is that also this requires that scientists, for example, they need to have a more open mind. So they cannot specialize absolutely on a specific technology or practice. They have to open to more interdisciplinarity, etc. These elements that I mentioned. The problem is, as I said, is that yes, in all strategies, education and training is mentioned, but at the end, the Commission cannot propose anything, so except generalities, because it's a competence of the member states.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Ilaria. Andrea, it's your turn now. Ilaria, please, could you switch your hand down?
Okay, thank you. I'm very pleased to listen to the Jesus presentation. I think it's really interesting, particularly the part on the do not harm principle. And I think this is a very important issue that you raised. And because if we analyze the evolution of environmental policies in the past, a lot of mistakes have been made by not applying this principle. Just to make some examples, the attention to reduce CO2 was made harmful effects on air quality in many cases. Let's just to think about diesel cars that are more efficient and they've been promoted, provoking air quality issues. Let's think to renewable diffusions, which produce impacts on land and landscape. And let's think to biomass. You mentioned the case of biomasses and the impacts on forestry and so on. So the problem of coherence of policies is I would not to say a new problem, but it was raised by the sustainable development policies, because it's an holistic approach, the sustainable development. And the Agenda 2030 in the famous 2015 year. Since that moment, I think the problem of coherence has been taken out. In any case, I think the problem of coherence is also raised when we think about the coherence between environmental policies and circular economy policies. And my paper at the end of which is the last one of the workshop, will touch this issue. I would just like to add one point, that is this problem of coherence has been tackled by the so-called taxonomy on sustainable finance, that lays down a legislative framework for the do not harm principle. But this framework is related to activities, not to policies. And if we analyze the last circular economy action plan, this principle of the do not harm to other policies is still lacking in its implementation. The approach is to directly contribute to the circular economy, not harming other policies. So my question is, do you think that the new European Commission will really put at the forefront the problem of coherence between the different policies and to establish a framework also for the do not harm principle in terms of analyzing different strands of policies?
So this is the objective, indeed. So really to apply this principle in all policies. Then between the objective and the practice, there can be really a difference, a gap. I mean, you mentioned the example of the taxonomy. So in the taxonomy, there is the do not significant harm. So we already say significant there, which watered down a little bit the objective. And you know that there was a draft delegated act published, and now is under discussion within the Commission before publishing the final delegated act of the taxonomy. And I can tell you, without entering into details, I'm not allowed to, that there are huge discussions, and sometimes, the trade-offs are very, very strong. So we don't know if the final delegated act will be as ambitious as we may had expected. What is now the good news is that really in the recovery and resilience plans analysis of the Commission, the do not harm is being applied rather strongly, I would say. The Commission even published a sort of guideline 1 week ago, rather interesting, even if general, on how to deal with sectors like gas or if I remember well, bioenergy. So in that sense, there are good news, but we have to be very, very prudent about what will be at the end the final decision, notably with the taxonomy. Then, of course, the big issue will be the current revisions of the legislation. So, how is going to be the Renewable Energy Directive revised? Is going to be really fully aligned with this do not harm principle? So we expect it will, but you can imagine that the process is very long. First, there is a long discussion, there is an impact assessment, there is a long discussion between DGs, some more, let's say, radical than others. Then there is a discussion with the Parliament, with member states, and at the end, the level of exigence goes down and down and down. So I'm working in this house for many years, so I'm sorry to say the things so directly, but this is my experience.
Okay, there are no more hands,
Interesting.
but thank you, Jesus. There are
There was
three
something in the
comments.
chat that I had no time
There are three
to.
comments in the chat.
Okay.
It's what I wanted to say. One is just Florian saying that in his presentation tomorrow he will explain the link between the do not harm principle and the recovering resilience facility. So we'll look forward to listening to Florian's presentation tomorrow. And then there are two questions. One from Mojca Briszczyk asking your opinion about, and the European Commission opinion about degrowth. And Enrico Gabriele asking about climate vulnerability. Is climate vulnerability anything similar to climate change? Maybe they could explain better if they want what they wish to hear from you. But I leave the floor to Jesus now.
The position of the European Commission on degrowth is very clear. So the Green Deal is a growth strategy. So there is no degrowth. I explained in my presentation that this is challenged by different people, including a recent report of the EEA. It's true that the Commission is working for, I would say, many years already on, for example, the concept of beyond GDP. So not necessarily challenging this idea of growth, but improving the GDP measurement through other indicators, environmental well-being, etc. But this is something that is ongoing work. But in terms of the growth, so the Commission is clearly not in this line.
Okay, to make a joke about this, I always say that you can grow by paying an orchestra playing Mahler symphony, or paying Apple to build to create the iPhone 25. It's the two different growth strategies. One is perhaps more circular, more green, and more environment friendly than the other. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second question was about climate vulnerability. Maybe the colleague can be more detailed in the question. I don't know if he can intervene.
Enrico, can you explain your question and anything better? So the floor is yours. Enrico.
Maybe he cannot use the microphone, maybe.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So if I understand well, I would link this question to climate adaptation, if I understand correctly. So one thing is the climate change, which is a fact. So is linked with the emissions, etc. So this leads to the mitigation policies with options that are rather clear. And the second component that is very often forgotten, or is a sort of small brother of mitigation, is climate adaptation. The Commission had already a climate adaptation strategy. I would say rather not as a strategy, but in terms of implementation, rather weak. And now I think tomorrow or next week, a new climate adaptation strategy is going to be adopted, much more ambitious. The idea of this new climate adaptation strategy is really to to facilitate that the communities are prepared for climate change, and that they already implement solutions in anticipation to the climate vulnerabilities, if I can use the same term. So you have to have plans, but you have to have solutions, and there are many that are already implemented in different cities and places. One of the typical solutions is the so-called nature-based solutions. So instead of protecting our coast with cement, we can protect them with dunes or with coral reefs, etc. So this is one of the components, but there are others. So policies on water, water management, water monitoring, on the circular economy. Of course, for example, water is going to be more and more scarce, so we need to use and reuse it better to be more efficient in the use and reuse, etc. So this is going to be presented in the coming days, I think. The problem is likely to be again implementation, because many of these measures require also resources, and they generally are not the priority. Because for policymakers, protecting their city, in reality, climate adaptation works when nothing happens. So if we have an extreme weather event and nothing happens, is because the policies or the solutions that we implemented worked well. The problem is something that you don't see. So for policymakers, it's not something very, very sexy. They cannot demonstrate, as they can demonstrate, okay, look, in my city, we are climate neutral. This is a strong political message. But saying, oh, I'm protected against floods or against urban heat. Yes, and what? Do you think this will give you votes? And this is always one of the issues of adaptation. Also, the fact that it's very difficult to measure. So how do we measure the impact of adaptation policies? So there will be a strategy that I recommend you to read. In my personal view, I had the occasion to read a draft. It's much better in the narrative than in the solutions, for the reasons I explained. But it's really ambitious. So this is also a positive thing. And the own climate law has an article on the importance of climate adaptation, which is also good in terms of policy. I don't know if I replied the question.
Okay, thank you. Enrico says yes. Okay,
Okay.
there are no more questions. I think no. Okay, so we can stop here. Thank you again, Jesus, and all those who attended the session for their participation. My coffee machine is already on the fire, so we can allow 10 minutes everyone to recover and to take a rest. We'll start in 10 minutes. Jacopo is okay?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Antonio. And
And
so, let's say
I'll be
5
also
past
the
11.
chair for the next session, so be prepared.
You are the boss.
Okay, 10 minutes to everyone. And, 5 minutes.
I have to attend another video conference at 11,
Thank
but
you
I
very
will
much,
rejoin later.
Jesus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Again,
Thank you.
for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
On behalf also of Massimiliano Mazzanti.
Okay.
Ciao, see you in 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Okay. I think that everybody is back, more or less. I don't see too many faces, but yeah, Jacopo, let's wait for until 10 past. Is okay?
Yeah, for me it's okay. We can, I think, handle
Because I think
things
that
with,
everybody has left the connection open, but I'm not sure that everyone is
do you think
actually
so?
here.
Okay.
So a couple
So,
of
but in
minutes,
any case, yeah.
and then we can start.
Yeah.
Approfitto di questa pausa per mandare un caro saluto ad Antonio.
Andrea, ciao, come stai?
Tutto bene, non volevo inserirmi dentro le registrazioni ufficiali, non potevo resistere a salutarti. Ciao, magari ci sentiamo successivamente.
Certo. Okay, it's now 10 past, so we can come back to the first and unique session of this morning. In fact, this is dedicated to reduction and regeneration. We have 3 papers in 1 hour and a half. So I would like to propose each presenter to have a 20 minutes presentation, so we can have a 10 minutes discussion afterwards. I'll try to keep the schedule by sending some notice on the chat. Okay, the 3 presentations are from Andrea Pronti, Sabrina Auci, and Massimiliano Mazzanti, then Ilaria Di Battista, and then Mauricio Gutierrez. So Andrea is the person who will present the first paper, whose title is "What are the factors driving the adoption and intensity of sustainable irrigation technologies in Italy?" Andrea, please, the floor is yours. And
good morning.
Good morning. Can you raise a bit your microphone? The volume.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Okay.
I try to share my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see my?
It's loading up. Yes. Okay.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we see it. Please go
okay.
on.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I'm Andrea Pronti, PhD candidate at the University of Ferrara, Department of Economics and Management. And this work, what are the factors driving the adoption of sustainable irrigation technologies in Italy, is made with Sabrina Auci of Department of Political Science of the University of Palermo and Massimiliano Mazzanti of the Department of Economics of Ferrara. We deal with technology adoption in irrigation in Italy, and just to be introduced the main issue we are dealing with, I start with the motivation of our work, and are related to the fact that agriculture is one of the most important driver of freshwater withdrawal around the world, and on average is it accounts for 70% of the freshwater withdrawals. So is in a very important sector in water issues, and as in around the world we have a lot of water scarce areas, and water due to climate change will be one of the most important problems in the next future, and especially in Southern Europe, in the Mediterranean. The climate change can affect also the production through a reduction of water availability because of higher temperatures and loss of soil moisture and general drying of lands. And one of the most fragile nation is Italy. And why we focused on Italy? Because Italy is one of the most important agricultural producer in Europe, and is a very high level irrigators, is just second after Spain in terms of irrigation. And the technology used in Italy is not really efficient at the moment, as only less than 10% of the lands are equipped with sustainable technologies, just considering drip irrigation, and the rest, more than 62% of the land are irrigated with furrow and flood irrigation, which are very not efficient systems. Briefly, what are sustainable technologies for irrigation? Are technologies which can work and help in water sustainable management strategies in the demand side, so reducing the water demand and improving the efficiency of water. And moreover, they can also help in the strategies, in the farmer strategies to adapt to climate change. In the literature, in water economics literature, these technologies are called the water conservation and saving technologies, and namely are, and we treat as water conservation and saving technologies in our work, drip irrigation, micro sprinkler irrigation, sub-irrigation. And why they are helping farming activities? They are improving the use of water, optimizing water consumptions, and reducing also hydric stress, so they reduce the time between evapotranspiration needs of the plants and water application. So they can have the quality and the quantity of crops can improve, and they improve also of course the water use in the consumption of the crops. And moreover, they have also qualitative effects on the crops and the cultivation, as they reduce the impact of the use of fertilizers as spillovers of chemicals in aquifers and in rivers. And just for who's not acquainted with these technologies, are quite common. Drip irrigation is on the left, sprinkler, and sub-irrigation, which is the most innovative technologies, which is working irrigating directly below the roots of the plant. How a farmer make adoption or innovate in irrigation, we follow the literature, the standard literature in adoption in agriculture. And what is saying this literature is that the decision of adoption is not just a one-step process, but it's a dynamic process in which several factors are in relation to the decision, the final decision of adoption of the farmer. So not just maximization of profits as in a neoclassical economic view, but also other factors are which are most of them, some of them are observable and other not, are influencing the final decision. and the perception of the expected utility in adoption of the farmers. So the decision is made after the several the understanding of several factors by the farmers, and comparing the decision or not adopt and adopt, considering the overall utilities, expected utilities, but not just limited to profit. So we just pictured roughly this process in considering 4 characteristics, which are individual, socio-political, innovation characteristics, and geographical and climatic characteristics, which some of them are observable and other not. So we consider just the vision of the farmer and the decision as a black box process. But at the very end, we can see if the farmer is happy in adoption or not, if he actually in the ex post decision of adopting or not. So we cannot measure the perceived utility, but we can see if the farmer decide to adopt, and then what we can do is to evaluate and list all the various characteristics and factors which are influencing the decision of adoption. So our research questions are mainly 2. And the first is, what are the factors which are influencing the adoption of water conservation saving technologies for farmers? And the second, which is following the first one, is which factors are influencing the intensity of adoption. So if the farmer is adopting, how much is adopting in terms of irrigated land? And in doing this, we consider different factors: socioeconomic, geographical, environmental, and climatic factors. And we believe that our findings and outcomes of our analysis can be important as suggestion for designing suited policies to boost mass adoption of water conservation saving technologies. There is interesting literature on this, on water conservation saving technologies, which is a branch of agricultural adoption technologies and innovation adoption in agriculture. But most of the analyses are developed in water-scarce countries, as Israel and Spain, Greece, and other developing countries, mostly in Africa. And most of them are using just single local case studies and cross-sectional analysis. And at the best of our knowledge, there are not other studies which cover this type of analysis in Italy. And moreover, we are improving the actual literature, adding a national case studies using panel data analysis, which are not really used in this type of studies. Talking about the data, we consider as water conservation saving technologies, I said before, drip irrigation, micro sprinkler irrigation, and super irrigation. And we use a panel data that we built using as a main resource the FADNA, the RICA data, which is the data sets from the national survey of the European data set, the national data set on farming, which collect many important information at micro level with the yearly survey. And we used the time frame between 2012 and 2016 as we had georeferenced data, and we used this data to merge our principal data set with a climatic data set from the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, using 25 kilometers square grid cell spatial resolution. And we focused on the main important economic and demographic and geographic variables from these data sets. We use as the dependent variable a dummy, indicating if the farm adopt these irrigations, the water conservation civic technologies, and in the second model, for the intensity, the logarithm of the area of irrigated with water conservation civic technologies. As explanatories, we consider different factors related to this, the dimension of the farm, the farmer, and the geography, and some information related to the water resources use and endowments of the farm. We use some financial variables. And we had, which was not so used in this literature, we had climatic or weather conditions variable. We tested several variables. At the end, we end using the aridity index at seasonal level, and we used the moving averages. So we used this indicator, which is the aridity index, which is calculated as the ratio of accumulated precipitation over the potential evapotranspiration at farm level for considering each season, but with 5 years back. So we consider the past 5 years seasonal aridity index as a perception of climate change. And we have the distribution, this geographical distribution of our dependent variables. On the left, the adoption with the clusters in red, which are indicating the adoption of water conservation civic technologies. On the right, the intensity from 0 to 1, which is yellow. And we can already see that some areas are more covered with this type of technologies than others. The explanatories are here and divided between dimensions, and we have some variable describing the dimension, the labor intensity within the farm, the type of crop produced, the value of land, the land size, and other on the demographic variables used in the standard literature as gender, age, education, level of education. And also we used a proxy for the risk propensity. We used the level of the cost of insurance to measure this. We had also other geographic variables such as the altitude, declivity, and the soil types. For the water use, we consider the cost of water and energy, and the area irrigated, and the source of water. And the others for financial, for the financial dimension. And the most interesting one is the last one that I introduced before, which is the seasonal aridity index, which is calculated between as a ratio between accumulated precipitation and potential evapotranspiration. It ranges between 0 and 1, indicating if the land is dry or not. The 1 is humid. We can consider the area as humid, and 0 below 0.6 we can consider is the area as arid. Our econometric models, for our analysis, we used probability for the first question, the probability of adoption. We used some binary choice models, so several for give robustness to our results. So we used logit model population average, probit population average, and we had also correlated random effect in order to consider individual heterogeneities. While for the intensity of adoption, we use a Tobit model because it can deal with sensor variables, both random effect and correlated random effect. I don't say much in technicalities, but These models are quite standard in this type of studies of adoption, the binary choice models. What we had the more in this analysis is using the correlated random effect that can help us in dealing with the heterogeneity, so reducing the endogeneity problem due to individual heterogeneities not observed. And because in this case we cannot use fixed effect because they are inconsistent, both for logit and for probit. And simply we use the Moonlight device adding in our analysis, which are mainly the time averages of the explanatories. And we did the same also for the intensity of adoption. So we used the true limited Tobit model, and we had in our estimation also these the time averages in order to consider the endogeneity problem. Also, because in this case we cannot use a fixed effect, and also we can combine the effect, the random effect utilities, which is of using time invariant variable, and also we can also have unbiased estimations. The main results are our models are indicating, which are quite robust. They don't change. They don't change the sign between the various estimations. I didn't report here the table because they are very big and they can stay in a single PowerPoint presentation. But just to, in a qualitative way, what is affecting the adoption is the value of the crop cultivated. So the highest is the value of the crop cultivated. The highest is the adoption, the probability likelihood of adoption of water conservation saving technologies. Also influencing positively, this is the total working hours available used in the farm, while the farm size and the land tenure are affecting negatively the adoption of water or these innovative these sustainable technologies. Other demographic variables such as family head or organic farms are not relevant, while family farms, which is indicating if the farm is run at family level, so not so commercial, as not hiring external labor force, is negative. Risk aversion is positive, so the higher is the level of insurance, and so as we consider this as a proxy of risk, the higher is the propensity of adoption. And age is not relevant, differently from other works in innovation adoption. Also, it is high education. While other geographical variables are constraining the adoption, which is the activity and the mixed. Also, what it seems to be more increasing the propensity of adoption is the type of soil, and in this case is a structure made of sand, which is affecting more the adoption of water conservation technologies. While other important and relevant variables is the use of internal water sources, and we refer to this considering lakes and ponds, so more groundwater use. And for others, okay, this, for the rest, the important variable, the climatic variable is significant and has the correct sign for autumn and winter, so which consider the not dry, wet seasons. So what is indicating that in the last 5 years, in this wet season, the higher is the level of aridity index, the less is the level of adoption. So it's correct. So the wetter is the land, the lower is the level of adoption. While we have some strange, conversely, we have some strange signs for in the dry season, so in summer and spring. So we have the opposite of what we expect. So the higher is the level of the RTD index, the higher is the level of adoption. But it's strange, but if we have a look at the graph here, we have the trend of the RTD index. We can see that more or less they are constant, the RTD index in the dry season, and they are quite below the level of 0.6, which is indicating a dry land. So the intuition behind this is that farmers are sensitive to water climate change, so to weather and climate conditions changes, but they are more interested, or they consider more these changes in the wet and the cold season. For intensity of adoption, more or less is the results are similar. So the main drivers of adoption, so what is influencing once adopt the technologies, the level of adoption in terms of irrigated land are the same. So the value of crops production, the area, the extension of the area irrigated, and the time, the working time spent within the farm. Whereas others, which are reducing the intensity of adoption, is the land size and the land value, and if the land tenure, which is indicating if the land is rent or not. And we made some other estimations at regional level, and they are saying the same, more or less. Here we have the average marginal effect, which is not, I'm not going to comment this. And just to conclude, we treat the ID of the farmer, which are more prone to adopt water conservation saving technologies, which are following the results that I already just more or less designed the line to you. And nothing to add. I'm running out of time. I finished, and we are very open to comments and suggestions.
Thank you, Andrea, for this very interesting work. I see one hand raised from Fabio Bartolini. Fabio, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm just introduce myself. I'm Fabio Bartolini from University of Ferrara. Thank you, Andrea, for this very interesting presentation. I have a couple of really questions or points just to one point is about from the map it's possible to detect some let me say spatial agglomeration of changes in irrigation technology. So I'm wondering if you consider also some let me say territorial or some aspect that came out from strategy of territory. So for example, the Capitanata in Puglia region and in Romagna, it seemed that they have adopted a lot of this new technology during your observation of time. So this is very interesting to explain, I guess, there, because you use mainly variables at the farm level, and then perhaps also something that can be used to explain those changes can be worth. Another point, and then how you explain the fact that your intuition about that farmers are more sensitive to the cold season rather than in the spring or in the summer, when they expected that the production will reduce by water shortage or extreme weather.
Can I add to this last question? Could it be perhaps that production in the cold season is more sensitive to irrigation, to high value irrigation, because precisely the crops cultivated in this period are high value crops? So this is perhaps the same question as before about the territorial agglomeration. I would like to suggest you to differentiate your analysis by cropping models. In fact, drip irrigation, for example, is very suitable for horticulture, for fruit production, and so on, but not very much for open crops like cereals and so on. So probably both factors, the territorial agglomeration and the seasonal concentration, actually mask the fact that those who irrigate in this way, or that have the highest propension to irrigate in this way, cultivate particular things. Okay, not and I have another question, if I may. It's about the workforce. Are you sure that the direction of the relation is not the opposite? That is, when you invest in these techniques, then you need more workforce. So it is not that because you have more workforce available that you are likely to choose drip irrigation, but since you choose the drip irrigation, you need more workforce.
Okay, thanks both. Hi, Fabio, thanks for your question. Because if not, I forget. About the geographical consideration, I was light maybe in the presentation, but we consider this as macro area of studies. So we divided between northwest, northeast, center of Italy, south of Italy, and islands. So we consider this high macro region and clusters of different irrigation. We did not for regions or for specific areas, because just don't add too much noise into the models, as already had a lot of variables. But we are aware about that. So and the results more or less are reflecting this. They are saying that the propensity of adoption is higher in the south and in the center, more than the north. And I think this reflects the availability and the endowments of water. As in the north of Italy, we have more surface irrigation from consortia, while in the south they more rely on pressured water delivered by consortia or groundwater. And about the second, I already forgot the second question. Was about
seasonality. Why farmers? How you can explain that it's more sensitive to cold
climate change? Okay. Yeah. Because we have more or less the expected signs for REP index, and our worst concern was related to summer and spring, which have the opposite sign. But if we see also at the graphs, we can see that they are more or less stable, the REP index. So what we can think is that farmers are already aware about that in the dry season they will expect a higher temperature and they will need a high level of water to irrigate. While they are more sensitive in their perception to the changes which are occurring in the seasons, which are most of the time are wet. So they expect rains and more wet season. So they are more propensity to look at the weather, on to consider the changes in the weather, in the climate during these seasons. That was my opinion, my idea, and my intuition, our intuition. In respect to what said Professor Massarutto, is right, considering different crops, and we put different type of farms in our models. We didn't develop the models within irrigation technologies and among other crop structure, because it was already difficult to deal with these big models with a lot of data and a lot of variables. So maybe it can be a work, an extension of this work in another paper, I think, because it was not so maybe I was not too straight in the presentation, also because it's not so easy to deal with all these variables at the same times. And for example, just I forgot to say about the macro areas that we used. Okay, I hope to have answered to your questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you also for being perfectly in time. Ilaria Di Battista is next in the schedule. Ilaria, could you please open your camera and your microphone?
Here I am. Hello,
okay,
everybody. Nice to meet you, first of all. I am a PhD student in environmental sustainability and well-being at University of Ferrara at the second year, but I have studied languages in economics and corporate and public communication during my university period. And I am sharing my screen, and I am gonna switch off the camera because I know that I will have technical issues, and if I have some, please
Not a
tell
problem.
me. Okay, just a moment. Do you see my screen?
No, we still see you. Okay, it's starting.
It's because of
Okay.
digital divide. Okay, thank you. And I think that you are able to see it now.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. So
I cannot see anything actually. I'm
Okay.
sorry for saying that. The problem is not me, of course. I was just wondering whether other people can see it or not.
I can see the slides.
Yes, if I can see, I think that everyone else can.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We can, it's all right.
Okay. Please, Ilaria, go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I would like to start. First of all, the title of my presentation and my paper is Pros and Cons of Plastic-Free Movement, Greenwashing or Greenwashing. And I would like to start this talk with a question that is, what does being plastic-free mean? I asked this like to 10 people in the last week, more or less, to have some reliable data to show you, and I collected the results in this presentation. But before giving you the people answers and then, of course, the correct solution to this tricky question, I lend you some time to reflect about that while I provide you some general information about historical and also regulatory excursus of plastic-free movement. So, fighting disposable plastic is one of the core elements of the circular economy package delayed by European Union in 2018, and this depends, of course, on the huge rate of pollution deriving from the wrong use concerning both the production, allocation, and disposal of this material. Actually, plastic is a material which gives the market many opportunities of efficiency, as you may see from the images that you see on the presentation. It is light, it is durable, it is cheap, and it is like fundamental in the health goods and also to the transport of food, for example. So this led, of course, in the recent 70 years to maximize its production. You can see here from the table that from 1.5 millions of tons per year in 1950, we arrived to 322 millions of tons per year in 2015. So it increased more than 300%. And this, of course, is directly proportional to the increasing of waste and plastic pollution, because plastic invaded, you all know, our natural environment, and it is a phenomenon which caused the introduction of microplastics in animals, so consequently also in human food chain. So its toxicity is extremely dangerous also for human beings, but I think that this is not the main point. Anyway, also its production is extremely toxic because if I don't go wrong, 400 millions of tons per year of carbon dioxide during the production and incineration phases contribute to the global warming, as also the Dr. Jesus said before. So recycling plastics could only stem this problem, but in Europe, the average rate of plastic collected for recycling is still less than 30%. And of course, this depends on the complexity of the recycling processes and also on the consequences on quality and costs of final products, in the sense that it's like it is hindering the pros that I previously mentioned, like the lightness and anyway. So it is of course not a good way to use you can recycle plastic for a limited time period. So the recycled plastic demand is only 6% in Europe. So it's not a solution, the recycled plastics. And we can also say that from a point of view of regulation, we do not have in Europe a common regulation, because, for example, in Denmark, they only recycle hard plastics, and here in Italy we recycle everything. So it's a very controversial aspect, this one. Of course, regulation and management and disposal of plastic seemed necessary. In fact, on June 2019, European Union attained the Directive 2019/904, which has the aim of reducing environmental consequences of disposable and oxo-degradable plastics and fiscal waste. With a deadline, and it is very strange, a deadline of transposition set by 2021, so only 2 years, a very little time limit to change the current economic system. In fact, all the private and public institutions are making some efforts to be in compliance with law, but the situation is not easy in terms of cost of transition. And concerning the social resonance that the directive had, many initiatives were born to respond to the law. I think that we all remember that at a certain point there was a chain reaction, and everybody started, more and more institutions, both private and public, started adopting some internal changes concerning the use of disposable plastics, declaring themselves plastic-free, and this is the main point. So we have some examples here. BNP Paribas, which was the first bank affirming it has so far managed to suppress disposable plastics in its workplace. Then we have also the Italian Ministry of Environment, or Philip Morris. You can see it in this link. Maybe later we will open it. But at this point, let's go back to the solution to the question, what does plastic-free means? Let's check before the answers of the civil society. So for the civil society, being plastic-free means being without plastic. Okay, fair enough. Then it means lifestyle, buying products without the plastic wrapping or packaging, and the fourth, substitute plastic packaging with more ecological material, which are two answers, both more aware than the first two. And my favorite is, even if I wanted to, it is impossible. So you can of course see that there is a discrepancy between what the firms have done to declare themselves plastic-free and what people think that plastic-free means. And somebody also answered Canapa, but this is another story. Of course, I didn't want to show a representative selection of answers, but I just wanted to give you some inputs to understand that there is this discrepancy. And now I will give you, of course, the solution to the question, and as always, there is no correct answer. So the communication studies literature does not currently offer an official and shared definition of plastic-free. Concerning some researches on current trends of big production and service firms, being plastic-free means refusing disposable and virgin plastics, proposing more sustainable alternatives. But the lack of rules that define a minimum standards or minimum parameter of being plastic-free allows firms to adopt personalized measures. So, as you can read, a firm could possibly declare itself being plastic free by eliminating water bottles in vending machine, but keeping on using snacks with plastic packaging. And of course, this makes being plastic free only a distinctive and competitive feature, even though there is, of course, a partial environmental benefit, and it is also in compliance with law. So it is a very controversial aspect of this communication stuff. Anyway, so at this point, we can notice that the difference between what people perceive and what people mean with the terminology plastic-free and what firms and brands do to declare themselves respectful of this principle is not the same. So in this case, can we talk about greenwashing? We can, of course, state that there is a problem, but I don't know if this phenomenon can be called greenwashing. So now I will give you some definitions of greenwashing. For example, in the book Accounting, Accountability and Society, Trends and Perspectives in Reporting, Management and Governance for Sustainability by De Baldo et al., published in 2020. It is written, there are some definitions, but the one that I want to use is the one from Lyon and Montgomery in 2015 that says, the word greenwash is used to cover any communication that misleads people into adopting overly positive beliefs about an organization's environmental performance, practice, or products. So, seeing to this definition, we may say that this could be a case of greenwashing, but greenwashing is, of course, regulated by the competition authorities in the various nations and could cost very expensive fines and sanctions up to, like, for example, in Italy, if I don't go wrong, 5 million euros. But the case of plastic-free is quite controversial from my point of view, since the missing of a shared and official definition in the communication area. And if there is not a respected standard and it only depends on the benchmarking of marketing areas of firms, because of course, if you want to make this step further and declare yourself plastic free, you see what the others have done and you only imitate the others. That's how benchmarking works. Is it possible to denounce all the firms that did this? The answer is no, of course, and there are many cons of this. This is not only misleading for the consumers, but there are also many bad financial consequences, as stated in the book Green and Sustainable Finance, Principle and Practices by Thompson, published in 2021, so very recent. Greenwashing is a real risk to the long-term viability of green and sustainable finance and to the development of green products and services in finance and more widely. If investors, lenders, and consumers lack confidence in the integrity of organizations, activities, products, and services labeled as green, then the organizational and individual behavior will not shift to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable low-carbon world. So, as you may see from this, the communication has a fundamental role in this transition, in the education of consequences. And in conclusion, the plastic-free certifications could be considered a good instrument to combat plastic-free greenwashing and to guarantee certain standards, but nowadays the certifications concentrate more on firms' product than on internal corporate practices. In fact, the aim of the paper that I'm writing is trying to provide, of course, an overarching definition of plastic-free concerning internal corporate practices and setting minimum standards for firms that want to eliminate disposable plastics and not plastics in general in the workplace in order to, let's say, keep coherence with environmental sustainability principles that Green Deal wants to respect and achieve. So I will certainly keep you updated for my work, and thank you for your attention. And these are some
Ilaria, we cannot hear you anymore. There might be some problem in the connection. Ilaria, are you still there?
We'll write her a message here in the chat.
Yeah.
Maybe she will read it.
No, I think she has.
Okay. Here you are.
No, I'm not Ilaria.
Sorry.
No, I'm Fabiola. I think she has some connection problem.
Yes,
I'm trying to call her.
I think so. She quit the.
Yeah.
Maybe she's going to enter back in a second.
She just wanted to avoid questions.
So, of course, I had technical.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes. Well, don't worry.
No, but I'm not worried.
But that was your last slide, was it?
What was that? I don't
the references.
know, of course. Oh, the references. Yes. The
okay.
last slide.
So we can switch immediately the floor to the audience to see if there are questions pending. I don't see any hand.
Better in that case.
Yeah, I see Jacopo's hand.
Yeah, I raised my both hands, the virtual and the physical one. So, Ilaria, thank you very much for your presentation. I have actually a more, let's say, philosophical or general question. And it is a question which comes from my ignorance in this topic. So, but are we sure that it is or it could be possible to be really be plastic free? I mean, I have in mind a firm which buys a variety of intermediates, and intermediates. So there are a lot of types of them, and I'm not sure whether a single firm can, let's say, unilaterally decide that it will be plastic free, because suppliers wouldn't accept that. So I have some doubts, or let's say, yeah, let's call them doubts, and then they are a sort of indication for perhaps for strengthening the paper. I have doubts about the definition you give about plastic free. I mean, if I understood well, you provided the definitions coming from the people, from interviewed people, and then one definition which I didn't understand the source of.
Yes. First of all, no, it's not possible, of course, being plastic free, not only for the suppliers and the contracts that a firm has, but because plastic is not a bad material. The management of plastic is made badly. So this is the first thing that I wanted to underline, also because I wrote the pros on, I mentioned the pros of plastics, because it is, of course, fundamental and essential for the health and sanitary products and goods. So this is the first. Second, I think that it's not possible to have plastic, to be plastic free in general, and my opinion is that plastic free is a terminology that is misleading. It's not that there should be a clear definition of being plastic free, and of course you have to be committed to be plastic free as a firm. But of course it must be there must be a definition of what being plastic free means for a firm, because if you talk with people, and I think that also in this room, in this virtual room, we can find people that say that being plastic free means avoiding and giving up to plastics. Since there are, of course, it's not it was just provocative. I only asked to people what do they think about being plastic free? What do they mean for being plastic free? And really nobody knew that being plastic free, for example, for a firm would mean being without disposable plastics, because this is the main difference. Being plastic free is being without plastic, but firms are giving up to disposable plastic. And this is the controversial part. That is why I would like to write on the paper that we need a communication definition of being plastic free that concerns also the CSR, so the corporate social responsibility practices. Yeah. That's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I fully agree with your answer, Ilaria. I think that one corresponding risk opposite to greenwashing is that of transforming something into a scapegoat who is a sort of a catalyst of everyone's attention, and a very comfortable way to show that you are doing something because you are just killing the scapegoat. Okay. Yes. I think that putting the focus on the sustainable use of plastics instead of abandoning plastics is a very promising research line, and also finding good indicators showing how good is the use that your corporate company makes of plastics is the right direction to go. Yes. To. I mean, in the end, the plastic-free world is very much feasible. Until 1950s, as you showed, the world was plastic-free. Yes. I'm not sure that the world was much better.
No, in fact, it was not. Of course.
Okay, in fact. So there are.
I wasn't there, so I can't testify that. So
Fabiola raised the hand before, but she dropped it. Marco Cantarella.
Good morning, Ilaria. I want to ask you, what do you think about bottom-up approach to change the plastic culture? Because I graduated the last June. I tried to have a mind game to try to set a circular practices in my town. I live in another developed area in Sicily, in particular a town under the Vulcano Etna. Here is strong the culture of use plastic, especially in the shop where sell fruit and vegetable. And I observed the reality. I saw a lot of hidden jobs, a lot of ladies that are seamstress that show their potential only on Carnival to realize custom. And so to realize a shopping bag, to change the culture step by step, and to try to change the culture from the bottom, give this shopping bag to this shop. And they continue to sell the plastic bag, but they have another solution with a good communication. Try to change the culture, because the traditional Sicily culture was circular, because they took blanket, they realized sweater after the plastic change this behavior. And what do you think about the bottom-up approach to change the culture?
I really appreciate the question, and of course I do agree, also because I come from southern Italy, come from Puglia, and I perfectly know what you mean, that the culture was circular before, and then the plastic arrived, but not only the plastic, the richness, we may say, and everything has changed. So I think that it is fundamental, of course, to go back. It's not going back because we now have technology. It's like mixing the past with the present, and the bottom-up approach is in my opinion, alone cannot do everything, but together with regulation can achieve a real change. That is what I wanted, what I believe. So, but the regulation without the understanding of the civil society is useless, in my opinion. As like, for example, for cigarettes, because we have the regulation of not throwing cigarettes on the streets, but people still go on doing that. So it is needed a mix of these two bottom-up and top-down approaches, and of course communication can do that, and I hope.
Okay, thank you very
Ilaria.
much. Any more questions? Yes, Beatrice.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Ciao, Ilaria.
Hello,
Ciao,
long
Ilaria.
time we don't see.
Can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's actually a very hot topic, and this morning I presented this the preview marketing, and we are actually working with the students about this concept. The plastic-free slogan is not working, so the main point is that in the preview marketing they say that now they ask the students to work on the plastic, so they cannot change the material. And I don't know whether what do you think if you think that the bioplastics can be a solution to perfectly overcome the plastic problem, the plastic issue, because from my perspective the main issue is that we have too much plastic, and sometimes it's not about being plastic free, but it's about reducing also the amount of not necessary plastic, because we have a huge amount of plastic that we don't actually need. So what do you think would be the solution, especially for supermarkets and for the groceries? Is it reducing, combining with bioplastics, or?
Okay. First of all, I think that bioplastics is a good way also to stem the problem, but it's not a real solution because, of course, as you said, we need to change the mindset and reducing the use of this plastic. But also in the biodegradable plastic, there are some problems. Like for the oxo-degradable, they only activate with the water. I don't remember the technical issues, but of course, it's not only a problem of changing the material, because if you change the material, you may think as a human being that you can again use plastics as much as you can and throw it away. So in my opinion, bioplastics, it's not a solution, even because the bioplastics contains a little amount of plastics inside, so it's not a real solution to that, and this is my opinion. So I think that the most important thing to do concerning the plastics is of course going on with regulations and trying to change the mindset and try to understand that in general we have access to some resources. I think that the human being has this really big problem of being a collectionist. We collection a lot. I am full of useless things, and we are not able anymore of reusing what we have. We totally forget that we have things and we buy them 3 times. And of course, if the system goes that way, it will never change. So I think that this is not a solution. Of course, if you have, like for example, cotton fioc in a biodegradable material, it's better because at least it will, at a certain point, it will go away. But it's not a solution. We have to change our behavior. in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that it's also quite difficult to. On the one hand, it's for some behaviors it's easy to change. For others, it's difficult because, for example, also thinking about myself, it's difficult to have the refill for the water machine detergent, let's say. So even for easier and everyday products, we don't have the solution. It's not easy. We don't have an offer that meets, for example, my demand or many people demand.
Yes,
So
and that is why I was saying that we need, of course, a bottom up, but also a top down, because if we have facilities or like firms that facilitate, of course, this change of behavior, it's better, and it is the only way of achieving a very large amount of people, in my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you also for this lively and interesting discussion. I do not see Mauricio Gutierrez in the audience.
Hola.
Hello. Because I read Mauro Hernandez.
Yeah, my name is Mauricio Hernandez. Yes.
Okay. Because Hernandez Gutierrez. Okay, sorry. Sorry for not recognizing you. So Mauricio presents from Chile. Is it late in the night there? Or
sorry?
Where are you based now?
8. They are 4 hours in difference.
Okay. So Mauricio will present a paper entitled "From Productivism to Regeneration in Socio-Ecological Systems: An Exploration of Tensions, Trade-offs, and Ways Forward." Please, Mauricio, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mauricio Hernandez. I am a doctoral candidate in business economics from the Universidad del Desarrollo in Chile. My English is very, very barbaric. So, I am sorry about that. But I will try to speak in a basic way and very slowly. Okay. So my doctoral thesis is very different. It's an ideological exploration from productivism logic or logic attached to economic growth toward an ideology that we call regenerative business, focusing on the active restoration, regeneration, and protection of ecosystem. So in this presentation, I will talk very briefly about this, and then some implication for the circular economy. So my thesis has 3 papers. The first is about conceptual development and the regenerative definition. The second is an empirical research, which thanks to all the energies of the universe, which publishes very recently. And finally, ethnographic work that changing my way of begin and thinking. So productivism is also known as growth. Is the belief that the measurable economic productivity and growth are the purpose of human organization, and that more production is necessary good. And the question is, what is alignment? So this discussion is very old. Population growth, for example, in Malthusian theory, they are not alignment signs. They are always possibility of substitution, neoclassic theory. But regardless of theory, productivism and the ambition for the economic growth not only leads to mental health in organizations and overshot in the environment, but also persistently pushing the planetary boundaries. So, but all is not so bad. There are many examples, mainly organizations, and in different sectors. For example, ecological design, water retention landscape, syntropic agriculture, permaculture, holistic management, that are creating through life, thriving and abundant condition for the life. So, Historias de Regeneración, or Regeneration Stories, is a good book. So, in this context, regenerative organizations are born. And what are they? They are ecological independence business that restore and regenerate degraded natural ecosystem and build resilience and improve the well-being of the communities railing off such ecosystem. So it's so interesting. In this research, we went looking for them. We learned, we work it, and even we live it with them. So this motivated the development of the following framework. In fact, this framework is the end of the thesis. I think I should change it, but briefly, regenerative organization operate here. The focus is the living system. Being and doing in the place are two relevant dimensions that regenerative organizations share. And the care blocks, symbiosis and mutualism, nature relatedness has part of beginning place, and engaging restoration and protection as part of doing in place, try to explain regenerativism. So, for definition, the blocks are not the only one. It is a exploratory phenomenon. So this dynamic. There's much to discover. So with this, we propose the following definition. Regenerativism is the belief that the place restoration, ecological engaging, and protecting of life support system are the inherent action, purpose, and responsibility of human organization, where relations, coevolutive mutualism, and care and intrinsical deep and synergy for conjoined human and natural flourishing, and the main purpose for a socioeconomic activity. So, the following two papers, very briefly, intended to support this definition. First, this paper was published a few days ago. It is an empirical study. We use data from an empirical survey in Chile of small organizations. We found principle and value of ecocentrism in these surveys. Ecocentrism is as an ecological philosophy, positioned as a moral entity with all its own right and values. It recognizes the intrinsic and inherent value of all life forms and ecosystem, irrespective of the utility they may have for humans. And through deep ecology theory, care dimension that could be explained regenerativism souls, we try to make sense. So deep ecology in psychological philosophy is more radical. That emphasis the inherent worth of living being regardless of their instrumental utility to human needs, and promote the restructuring of modern human society in accordance with such ideas. So, through configurational analysis and set theory, we determine three combinations that could be explaining ecocentrisms in this organization. Okay, so this is a result table. The three combinations are market reformist, decouplistas, and self-centered activists. So the first solution, this approach, is driven by ecological reform, particularly by the need to change or modern consumption-driven lifestyle in order to achieve environmental sustainability. Decouplistas is driven by a social engagement and the conviction that environmental protection is indeed decoupled from economic growth. Self-centered activists is very strange. It's an angle of ecological crisis and the need of market reform, yet it is actively engaging in action to protect the environment, as these are seen as the right thing to do and the right benefit to the individual. It's a very strange results. So finally, this ethnographic change in my life, there were three organizations our approach drawed on the work Whitman and Goudet. They emphasize that to truly understand interaction in socio-ecological context, first-hand situated knowledge in place is essential. So the Fundo Pangilemu, which work with holistic management, a tool that allow to biologically regenerate the quality of the ground through animals. The color here is very explicit. Fundo Punta Callao, which uses forest restoration techniques to stimulate the regeneration of native forest. And Huerta Sade organization, an organization that promotes local socioeconomic development and syntropic farming agriculture. So this organization are amazing. There are many others initiatives. They are good example in this book, Historias de Regeneración, Professor Pablo Muñoz in Liverpool. But working, learning and living with a powerful ecological ethics with evident results on increase in biodiversity, vegetal structure, resilience of ecosystem, and a natural flow of input and output. It is a real and current option to face ecological sustainability challenges. It's very amazing. Some implication and contribution for the circular economy are nature-based solutions such as holistic management or regenerative agriculture, not only lead to significant increase in the stock of resources, but also naturally improve the circular flow of input and resources of a system. There are many techniques and tools that derive from precisely these principles and can and can drive transformative change. Not only ecological system or closer to nature are giving these changes, but also in sectors such as design and construction through regenerative development tool. Second, focusing on small places and pay attention to those micro fundamentals, foundations, can provide novel solution, a large scale answer. I think that the circular economy as focusing on try to give macro answer, and that could create some ambiguities. So therefore, we need to pay attention again to micro aspects, especially those that shape how human systems are involved in natural systems. And finally, if organization and business recognizing their explicit role in natural system that surround them, it is possible that by getting involved and feeling part of them, improve the probability of protecting ecosystem, and at the same time adoption of circular production alternatives. So thanks. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry for my prehistory English. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Your presentation has been very clear. Thank you, Mauricio. And okay, Marco Cantarella has still the hand raised, but I think he forgot it from before. Okay. Anyone? I can perhaps take the starting, make the starting question, since there are no other participants ready. I think that I try to summarize what you said and to translate into my own language. Okay, I think that as Jesus has warned us this morning, that the circular economy is about growth and not about degrowth, but it is a different way of meaning of intending growth. Perhaps and also, of course, a different way of intending technological innovation and intending and meaning a different meaning of technology. I think that what you are saying, please correct me if I misunderstood you, is that the big challenge that the circular economy poses, and that could be linked with the other concepts that you have described, is precisely this push towards a new paradigm of technology that is not anymore intended as an opposition to nature as it was in the past, but a way to collaborate with nature. And I think that this is a sort of this is a true Copernican revolution that is not about just techniques and the devices, but again, someone has talked this morning of mental framework. Okay, we have to change our mental framework towards, which is as Western. As people trained in the Western culture since the ancient Greeks and since the Greek philosophy and so on, we have learned that nature is a sort of not an enemy, but something that mankind has to struggle against. Okay, and it is now time to finish with the struggle and to restart with co-working with nature and understanding once more humanity and mankind as a part of nature and not as an opposition to nature. This has also a very profound philosophical, ethical, even religious implications. Let me say, and I like very much this this. I don't think you. I don't know if you agree with this, but
yeah. We are a part of nature, and the solution, I think, must focus in nature-based solution, emulating nature, learning from her. So it is basically, yeah.
Andrea.
Thank you, Antonio, to living. Mauro, you're in Chile, and the debate you raise is very interesting. And in Europe, we are facing a new trend, which is the diffusion of electric vehicles. And you know, one of the environmental problems we see in diffusion of electric vehicles, there are huge environmental benefits in terms of air quality, but you know, batteries, they use a lot of lithium. And lithium is produced, if I am not wrong, particularly in Chile.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to have your opinion of which are, if there are any environmental impacts related to the lithium production in Chile, because this opinion, I think, is very important to the debate of what circular economy and environmental protection should be in Europe as well.
It is complex because the licitations biddings is right. The rise of extractive resource lithium is a property of big companies, big business. Unfortunately, the state not present warranties. So the resource use is arbitrary, and so 1 minute.
You can speak also in Spanish. I mean, if you speak slowly, maybe we can understand. Most of us.
Los derechos de explotación del recurso están a mano de grandes empresas, big company, the government, el Estado, the state, no intercede mayoritariamente. Eso es lamentable. Y la explotación del recurso, las garantías en términos de environmental protections, asegurar un uso eficiente del recurso no está garantizado. Las grandes empresas explotarán el recurso y lo único que hace el gobierno es cobrar un impuesto, a tax. Es lamentable, eso es lo que sucede.
Mauro, in my opinion, it's very important the role of research, particularly in your country, on the environmental impacts related to lithium extractions. And these environmental impacts should not be seen in a traditional way. You know that the lithium extraction is mainly placed in desert areas or similar to desert areas that seems to have no particular economic value from the economic point of view. Indeed, the contribute of the desert ecosystem is a major environmental contribute. And the role of research is also to put an economic value to the ecosystem services that are provided by also this kind of ecosystems. I think and I believe that Chilean people is very proud of having such a particular ecosystem in their country. And so it's very important that research and economic research also approach this type of evaluation. Anyway, this is a global matter, but it should start from your own country.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about? In Spanish.
Pasará lo mismo que sucede con el cobre. La explotación de minerales, nosotros, el país, solo cobra un impuesto por la explotación de minerales que no es grande. Hace poco un estudio demostraba cómo todos los ingresos que habíamos perdido producto ese impuesto que estaba mal diseñado. Entonces, la explotación del recurso sigue siendo un dilema en este país. Me guste o no, este país sigue dependiendo de la exportación de recursos naturales y contribuyendo muy poco en la restauración y la regeneración del recurso, en especial de aquellos recursos que no tienen una tasa de regeneración como son los recursos mineros. Entonces, las políticas siguen concentradas en eso y existe mucho conflicto de interés, mucho interés creado y eso dificulta de gran manera poder actuar con mayor determinación.
Okay. There are no more hands raised, I think. No, not even in the chat. Okay. Thank you, Mauro. Thank you also to Andrea for his contribute to the discussion. I think that we can stop here. It has been a very interesting and very lively session. So I would like to thank everyone who attended and to thank especially Jacopo and the organizers for making this possible. Okay, see you this afternoon and have a good and refreshing lunch.
See you later. Bye.
See you later.
Ciao, see you later in the afternoon. Have a good lunch.
Ciao,
Smart,
ciao.
working lunch.
Sorry. Hello. How does it work with the chat for the presenters? Do we have to create a meeting, Google Meet, and post it? Or yes?
Which one? Which chat are you meaning? The chat of this of this session?
At the beginning of the session, maybe I.
We have a chat here, but
Okay, but no, it was supposed to make some breaking rooms.
Sorry?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Jacopo, your microphone is not working.
We are not hearing you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I pushed wrongly the micro. So sorry everybody for that. So I was wondering. Okay, I was first of all thanking Andrea for asking, and saying to Antonio that yeah, the original idea was that each presenter, if he or she wanted, could post a meet link in the chat of this virtual room.
Okay.
So that he could get in touch with, let's say, specific.
If there are specific questions to him, to her, okay.
Yeah. So actually, I had the impression that there was not so huge interest in that, and I didn't press on that any longer. So Andrea, did you mean that you actually posted one meet link in the chat? Because I cannot see it.
No. I was asking because I lost the first the presentation of the session, so maybe you were giving indication to that. I remember that there were some.
Okay.
Okay. So fine. No links.
So let's say nice idea, even nicer not to do it.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. See you later. Bye.
See you at 2 then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.